Good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for coming to our session. Specialists and researchers in the field of intercultural communication called cross-cultural pragmatics have accumulated a lot of facts that illustrate the differences in the communicative behavior of in different cultures. These facts show that people do not only speak different languages, but use them in different ways according to specific social and linguistic norms, values, and sociocultural conventions. In the same situation, they often use different strategies and language tools. Regular use of any action or strategy leads to the formation of communicative features, more broadly communicative dominance, the totality of which forms a culture-specific communicative style or communicative ethno-style, which can be viewed as a framework for systematizing and interpreting linguistic and cultural idiosyncrasies, and an important tool, didactic tool for second language teaching. Currently, researchers are undertaking interesting attempts to demarcate various styles of communication. In this case, however, there is no single approach to their selection, no single system of terminology, which is but natural at the initial stage of the problem. Therefore, questions about what is meant by style of communication, how can it be defined, what parameters can form the basis for its description, what constitutes its stylistic features, what methods can be used for its description, and how should it be taught remain open. William Goody-Kunst and Ting Toomey suggest reducing all national characteristics to four styles of communication based on the dichotomous opposition: direct, indirect, elaborate, succinct, personal, contextual, instrumental, effective. As you can see, they are related to the way people reflect their communicative intentions in their speech, to the quantity of speech and its expressiveness, which is considered the norm in a given culture, to the role played by context in a communication, and above all, the relationship between the speakers, to the aim of communication and display of emotions. In one way or another, the above-mentioned styles of communication exist in all cultures, but it's important to determine which of them are dominant. The proposed classification has great explanatory value, since it helps to understand the existing similarities or differences in communication in an intercultural perspective and to justify their existence. To some extent, those styles have something in common with the ideas of Paul Grice, since they relate to those parameters of communication like quantity, quality, relevance, and manner, clarity of speech, etc., and at the same time convincingly demonstrate that the concept of effective communication is not universal but culturally variable. The classification proposed by Goody-Kunst and Ting Toomey gives a general scheme of possible stylistic differences, and it is interesting in the sense that it shows which parameters can be the basis for the description of styles, that is, it helps to highlight stylistic features. These features can be like the following: a way of expressing communicative intentions, subject-object orientation, degree of expressed emotions, degree of expressivity, these are different things, degree of conveyed information, degree of formality, aim of communication, is it to convey something or to merely maintain a relationship, volume of the text, and others. This list can be continued. So, how can culture-specific communicative style be defined? Since any communication entails the use of language as well as behavioral aspect, we believe that in general, culture-specific communicative style or communicative ethno-style can be defined as type of communicative behavior shaped by culture and consolidated by tradition, which becomes apparent in the choice and preference of particular strategies and means of communication, both verbal and non-verbal. Two important things should be taken into consideration here. First is high level of generalization admitted in the description of styles, and the second is their relative nature, of styles, which is revealed in cross-cultural analysis. The fact that a nation as a whole constitutes different social groups, each of which has its own canons of communication, is natural. In addition, each person has his or her own individual characteristics or idiostyle. In our case, we are talking about typical behavior of typical literary language users in typical situations. Admitting that the fact that modern literal language does not represent a completely homogeneous linguistic structure either, we believe that it is legitimate to speak of the presence of certain communicative dominants distinguishing communicative behavior of the linguistic culture of one, which together form an ethnocultural style. And Kate Fox's words, which are found in her book, Watching the English, The Hidden Rules of Behavior, reaffirm the same. She notes that people from St. Petersburg talk about Muscovites as though they were members of a different species. East Coast and Midwestern Americans might as well be from different planets. Ditto Tuscans and Neapolitans, Northern and Southern Mexicans, etc. Even cities such as Melbourne and Sydney see themselves as having radically different characters. And let's not start on Edinburgh and Glasgow. In all these cases, however, the people of these admittedly highly individual regions and towns have enough in common to make them recognizably Italian, American, Scottish, etc. I'm interested in those commonalities. And to describe ethnostyles of communication, we should deal with such commonalities. Therefore, I repeat that in comparative cross-cultural studies, we can't avoid generalization, as we don't compare individuals, but cultures. Another point which should be emphasized is the relative nature of ethnostyles. At this stage, due to the lack of effective methods in cross-cultural research, the description of ethnostyle of communication and its inherent stylistic features should be carried out in comparison with another ethnostyles, since the differential character of each ethnostyle can be highlighted effectively only through comparison. This is a necessary condition to avoid ambiguities and inaccuracies in the description of styles, which unfortunately are not rare. Thus, for example, in the classification of William Goodykunst, American style is defined as direct. Yes, that's true if we compare it with Japanese or Chinese, but that's not true if we compare it with Russian or Hebrew, where it's vice versa. In this case, Russian style is more direct compared to the American one. There are another examples of these inaccuracies, I may say. So Russian style is considered as emotional or affective, and again, that's true if we compare it with Anglo style, for example, but if we compare with the Arabic style, we can see the different characteristic of it. So for example, Chagall, in his book on intercultural communication and Arabic world, notes that Arabs speak about the Russians and all other Europeans as cold and calculating people. So they're not effective at all in comparison with the Arabic culture. And the stylistic variation is, such stylistic variation is typical of other stylistic features as well, and this is no accident. Style is known to be formed under the influence of extralinguistic factors, in other words, under the context. The most important extralinguistic factor in the ethnocultural communication style is the type of culture in which it is taking place or to which the interlocutors belong. So culture is context of communication, which is in a broad sense, I suppose, correspond to what Istvan calls pre-context. The distant features of each culture determine how the speakers express their thoughts and intentions, clearly or with ambiguity, in a concise manner or descriptively, freely express emotions or restrain themselves, observe distance in communication or prefer closeness, etc. What is characteristic of one culture can often be unacceptable to the other. That is why the well-known maxims formulated by Paul Grice for individualistic or low-context cultures in the terms coined by Edward Hall, as well as the strategies of politeness put forth by Brown and Levinson, may not to the same extent be applicable to the collectivist high-context cultures, for example, to Russian. This type of culture is determined by other communicative features and forms a different style of communicative behavior. Interesting evidence of the impact of culture on language and its use can be seen through national variants of the same language. As an example, in particular, one can mention the Indian version of English. And as I know, Nilakshi is going to give some very interesting evidences of the impact of Indian culture on the communicative style of speakers of Indian English. Also, I would like to emphasize the vivid connection between verbal and non-verbal communication, which shows that communication itself is a system and culture-specific style also has a systematic nature. So some examples. Distance, an inherent cultural value, is observed in both spatial distance as well as verbal distance, defined by an elaborate system of negative politeness strategies. Here I'm talking about distance in British communication. The British avoid giving directives, avoid using imperatives, do not give unwanted advice, do not make unnecessary comments, etc. The Russians, who belong to collectivist culture, demonstrate a much shorter distance, both in non-verbal and verbal communication, and find this quite appropriate. I mean, hugging, touching on the non-verbal level of communication and giving advice, making comments, interrupting, using imperative, etc., on the level of verbal communication. The same can be noticed while observing the emotional aspect of communication. The conventional British and American smile, as I see it, is reflected in verbal communication as well. We can see it in regular usage of positive politeness strategies, in conventional communicative support, or what I call communicative gifts, such as compliments, praising, exaggerations, which result in abundance of superlatives, which is typical trait of the English, British and American as well. Russians, who normally smile at those whom they know and like, are less expressive in verbal communication as well. We do not like exaggerations, as one of the dominant cultural value of Russian culture is sincerity. On the other hand, it is interesting to note that Russian style is affective, and the Russian language itself has many more words and expressions to convey emotions than English. That these are different contexts and different pragmatic, actually, of emotions, which I'm not going to talk about today. Let me give you an interesting example concerning the connection between verbal and non-verbal communication from other cultures. The Japanese and Koreans, who represent cultures with high vertical distance, bow down while greeting as a mark of respect for the other and belittle themselves. And they repeat the same strategy of personal derogation and self-deprecation on the verbal level as well. An interesting example. A Korean postgraduate student, after his presentation at a conference in Moscow, instead of using the conventional phrase in European cultures, "Thank you for your attention," in Russian it would sound "Спасибо за внимание," surprised everybody by saying "Простите за мой скудный и неинтересный доклад," which is in literal translation means "Forgive me for my poor and uninteresting presentation." A very unexpected verbal act, actually, but at the same time, it is quite understandable if we look upon communication as a system. Actually, what he has done, it was what, as I call it, a verbal bow made to show respect to those who listened to his presentation. Thus, we can speak of two complementary substyles in the area of communication, verbal and non-verbal, which together form an ethnostyle of communication. Here I tried to give the definitions of these substyles. Culture-specific communication style is a multidisciplinary phenomenon and should be viewed and studied from different aspects, such as cultural, sociocultural, axiological, sociolinguistic, psycholinguistic, linguistic, pragmatic, etc. I'd like to illustrate this by showing some characteristics of English style revealed through a comparison with Russian conducted through empirical research. As it is not possible to give a detailed comparative analysis of all the identified features of the British and Russian communication style in the course of this presentation, I'd like to draw your attention to some of them. So when we compare these two styles of communication, we can note that English style, which belongs to individualistic culture, is distant compared to the Russian, which is contact. And here, this is the result of difference in horizontal distance, which is characteristic for these cultures. As a result, for vertical distance, English style is egalitarian, while Russian style is status-oriented. And as a result of these two characteristics, English style can be characterized as non-imposing, when Russian is quite imposing. Imperative, for example, are very typical phenomena in our communication. Also, English style can be characterized as hearer-oriented because the interest of hearers prevail over the interest of the speakers, while Russian style is more speaker-oriented. We can absolutely freely use such sentences as utterances as "I ask you," "I invite you," I advise, and so on and so forth. Another characteristic, I call English style as form-oriented, because as we all know, it is very important not what is said, but how it is said. And we know this very famous English proverb, manners make the man. So the form of the utterance, how people express, in what way their communicative intentions is extremely important. While in the Russian culture it's not so important. It is more important not the form, but what is said, just the information. So that's why I think we can call it message-oriented. And because of that differences also, we can see that English style is very much implicit. Sometimes it is difficult to even understand what is meant, but this or that utterances, as I'm just wondering whether you are interested in coming. Russian people normally have difficulty understanding whether it is invitation or doubt or even maybe mockery, yes, because it sounds very insincere. And Russian style is quite explicit. If invite, I say just come, I invite you, and in many other aspects, not only invitation. I just look it through different speech accent. I see it's the same different. If you want some more explanations, I'll give later. Regarding emotions, I characterize English style as emotive. It means that the signs of emotion, verbal and non-verbal, are used frequently, but with strategic purposes. And Russian style is much less emotive, as I have already mentioned. Exaggerations, yeah, we don't like actual exaggerations. Yeah, Russian culture encourages people to say what they feel and to say what they mean. And on the other hand, English style can be characterized as restrained. Yeah, when we deal with real emotions which people feel. Yeah, because to be self-controlled and restrained is also a typical characteristic of English communicative behavior, while Russian culture encourages to feel free in display of emotions. That's why this style can be called as emotional or affective. And also for those reasons, English style is more expressive because of all the superlatives, and Russian can be characterized as moderately moderately expressive. As for regarding the volume of the utterance and the volume of the text, I will show it on my examples a bit later. English style can be called as voluminous, while Russian is concise and laconic. I admit that some of these terms might not be very much appropriate. Actually, I had difficulty finding proper words, and I'm absolutely open to any suggestions and even would be most grateful if you have any. The differences, so here, yes, as I have promised, I want to show, these differences on some examples. Here you have the situation, invitation of a friend, the English version. You wouldn't be free for dinner on Thursday by any chance? Let me see my diary. Yes, that seems to be fine. Fantastic. Shall I pick you up at around 8? Yes, thank you, Michael. I look forward to seeing it. You can see in different colors I marked manifestations of negative politeness strategies and positive politeness strategies, which you can see here. Russian style, you see, it's much Russian invitation, if we end it. This invitation to Russian would much more laconic, and we don't have all these would it be, shall I, but it is much more direct. Only I may read it actually in Russian because here are some people who know Russian. Just to compare how it sounds. Ты в четверг вечером свободна? Может, поужинаем вместе? Сейчас посмотрю. Да, в четверг свободно. Отлично. Тогда я заеду за тобой около 8. Actually, here I have for non-Russian speakers literal version. Yes, that will be enough. Literal translation of this Russian version. So you see, it is much more, how to say, it is shorter, and there are no these positive politeness strategies, manifestations of positive politeness strategies, and negative politeness strategies are also used just once. Another yes, that was invitation taken me from a book, but from my ethnographic observation and my ethnographic data and collection, I have even much more vivid example, like you see on the slide. Yes, and again we can compare how abundant English invitation is. How many abundant, I mean, with these superlatives. Yes, very well indeed. Sounds great, perfect, marvelous, great. Again, sounds perfect, great. Thank you. We can't see it in the Russian text. Instead of all the superlatives, just it's a good idea, хорошая идея, and again, хорошо, good or fine, only once it can be отлично. Yes, and again, there are no manifestation of this negative politeness. Would you be free? Would 1 o'clock be perfect? What about? Just very much direct. Yes, and as I told, message oriented. Yeah. How are you? Shall we have dinner on Tuesday? Good idea. Let's meet in this cafe. Good. Lena and Romo will be there too. Perfect. Then see you there. Agreed. That's it. So much shorter. And one more. Actually, I have some more, but you see, again, all this situation of parting, and also from my ethnographic observation. So this is taken from real communication. So here we can see again, that it is full of overloaded with all these markers, English text with overloaded with all these markers of positive politeness strategies, which I call as communicative gifts. Yes, communicative support to the speaker, and Russian style is very much different. And one more example, just to finish this comparison. Here, these are two real email messages, letters of reminder. The first one, which is in English, I got from Cambridge University, and the second one is one of famous Russian universities. So I'd like to pay your attention to this text. Actually, they have the same plot, but how the same communicative intention, yes, is expressed here, but the way is absolutely different. So, dear colleague, I just wanted to send you a gentle reminder that we are hoping to hear from you about whether or not you will be able to attend the English profile. Please see, touch, and invite. I would be grateful if you could get back to me about this as soon as possible. Please accept my apologies if I have already responded. Thanks and best wishes, and the name, Jane. The Russian text is again much shorter. Here we don't see any softness of, actually it's a kind of imposition as well, yes, because it's a reminder, no softness, no just gentle reminder, no would be, no could, neither we have any positive markers as grateful, apologizing, thanking, best wishes, and so on. What is interesting here in the Russian dialogue also, that it is written from an organizing committee. You see, уважаемые коллеги, it's in plural. We repeat, we say again our message. We wait for your confirmation. We ask you to inform whether you're coming or not, and no name, which is also very interesting. If it would be organizing committee. So, summing up, what I would say, the differences in the style of these dialogues and letters can be easily explained if we start with the differences in types of cultures and go to sociocultural relations, then cultural or communicative values, understanding of politeness, which is based on these values actually. So all these moments are interrelated. Then politeness strategies, and the regular usage of politeness strategies shape dominant features of communication, which in total shape this culture-specific communication style. So this is my idea of how it should be analyzed and taught. Such an approach enables the students not only to observe the differences in communication, but also to understand and explain them, which makes the process of second language learning a conscious exercise. Thus, the description of culture-specific communicative styles is an important theoretical field which has a vast didactic application. It gives a useful guideline for second language speakers. By having a knowledge of dominant characteristics of the communicative style of the target language and culture, it is not necessarily to learn the patterns of behavior in a particular situation, which is actually impossible. Second language speakers can modify their behavior accordingly. It is not so uncommon that second language speakers, in spite of linguistic competence in a second language, still use the language in their own way, provoking numerous communicative failures and breakdowns. Thus, speaking second language with a proper communicative style is the highest level of communicative competence. And please forgive me for my poor and uninteresting presentation. Oh, sorry. Thank you for your attention.